Um,
Yeah, how you been? You've been up to a lot.
yeah, I'm doing my presidential duties
Absolutely.
to support our Global African Business Association as well as making things happen. How about yourself? How things going?
Things are going well. Things are going well. Mostly the 9 to 5 job and doing some helping out. I know I do some freelancing on the side as well for website design, some things like that, building marketing funnels. So do that and real estate, of course, looking to rehab duplex that we've acquired earlier this year, and just getting
Okay,
up and ready. I think I told you about real estate as well. Uh,
that
yeah,
sounds great.
yeah, it does. Guess I won't take too much of your time today.
No,
I'll,
I'm fine, brother.
all
It's after 9 here. I'm free as a bird.
right,
We
cool.
take as much time as we want.
I
So
guess
take your time.
what does your day usually look like? Do you you own a business? You work for yourself, or you go to work, or you retired?
I'm getting there, brother. um, My professional background is in education. I've been an educator for 20 years. I spent 16 of those years in K-12. The last four I've spent in higher education. I'm an academic advisor at a community college here in Detroit.
Okay.
I've been doing that the last 4 years in the career coach. So what I've done is the reason why I've moved GABA in the direction I've been able to do it is because basically, in a nutshell, I integrate a lot of the skill set that I've learned being an educator into GABA in terms of leadership and career coaching and those types of skill sets that have really helped the organization to be successful. So I have been doing that for quite some time, and at the K-12 level, I've been a career coach. I've been an assistant principal. I've been a teacher, English language arts and social studies. Most of my career has been in middle school. I've done a little bit of elementary, a little bit of high school, teaching English and language arts. Um, I was also a reading specialist, taught a little bit of economics and history. So um, it's in my blood. My daddy, coming from Nigeria, he was an educator as well. When he got to the U.S., he switched his career path to engineering. So he became a civil engineer, went to school here, graduated from Lawrence Tech University in 1978, went back to Nigeria in 1980. And so, and practiced engineering over there back home. But, he started off as an educator. So I guess that's where I get it from him, that spirit. But I've always been in education. I love it. I love helping people. I enjoyed helping children, but I help children on my own path, my own terms now, as opposed to being in the classroom.
Right.
I enjoy helping young adults and just helping adults in general with their career paths and classes and things like that. So I do work. A regular 9 to 5. I got a couple of hustles on the side. One leaning towards transportation. Other is will be a startup dealing with drop shipping. I'm actually putting the concept of that together and then integrating it into the GABA network. And the third thing I would like to get into is staffing. That's always been a personal passion of mine is staffing, where I get a couple of contracts from a couple of companies and do job placement. And the reason I want to do that is because most immigrants, Black immigrants that enter the U.S., they may be here on an F1 visa or some type of other visa, but they really want to stay in the United States and work, but they don't know the tools or have the tools for someone to sponsor them. So we can leverage our staffing agencies like a Kelly Services or an Deco or a Manpower and leverage our staffing agencies to hire and sponsor potential Black immigrants who may want to work here in the United States lawfully. We don't have a lot of those. We don't have a lot of those staffing agencies that look out for us. So I feel like it's really our responsibility to develop that network. If I started here in Michigan, it'll end up in Nebraska, where you're at. If it's in Nebraska, it'll end up in Texas, and so forth. And so I really that's a personal goal and a personal passion that I have. I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it for the service. And that's what I want to provide for our community. Some people look at me as a community activist. I'm not a community activist. I'm not a social justice freak or anything like that. What I am is as an empowerment coach. And I feel that if we have tools of empowerment that we can establish correctly and righteously, the wealth will come, and the wealth will come on its own. It manifests on its own, guaranteed. As long as you have good customer service, and good business skill set, where you're not making your first million and you go out and spend it on a Bentley and get $1 million home, and you just made $1 million. So it's all about putting things in perspective. So that's me. A lot of people, I shared that with you for a reason, because I am a very intense hard worker, as you can see, and I believe in teamwork 100%. So I wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, that's great. Quick parenthesis on the drop shipping, because I've worked with people who own Shopify stores, and I know the power in that. I myself kick get mad at myself for not being more involved into that, because I know how passive, or I guess it's not really passive when you have to be doing work. The need is there for drop shipping. That's a quick parenthesis there.
Yeah, it's a beginning stages. It's a beginning stage for myself and a couple other people. We were moving forward. There was 3 of us that was moving forward, and then the person who was helping put together the business structure, she had to leave. I don't know if she'll come back or what. I haven't really talked to her, but we had a mutual friend that passed away recently, and that she was more like a sister to her. So her mentality, her mindset has been taken off her square. And I didn't pressure her or anything. I'm just trying to move things forward before the end of the year. Before the end of the year, I'd like to get things moving, at least on this end, so that way we can at least have some level of e-commerce that we can leverage within GABA to show these stakeholders that we mean business. And so I put myself on a 60 to 90 day plan to really get this off the ground, and that's what we're going to do.
Awesome. That's awesome. I don't think we get to talk much about GABA, how it came out to be. I think when you and Deborah had that talk, or however you introduced it to her, I was not around. So I've just been reading things here and there, just pick it up as I see things come through the group. But yeah, I'd be curious to what got you into GABA, starting it, or how that all came to be. And I know all the things that you have been doing now, as great as it is, and the power of such a group. But what was the genesis of that all?
So back in 2013, I was living in Houston, Texas, teaching, and I reconnected with an old high school friend of mine. So the executive vice president of GABA is Rary Onamake. Right. So we reconnected on social media, and we've known each other since high school. We reconnected on social media. We started talking about some ideas of how to empower Black people. We're both Pan-Africanists.
Is that Rary, the Richard in the group? Sorry.
That's correct. That's
okay.
The one and only.
Okay. Right.
We looked at ways to empower. We wanted to empower Africans, Black folks, and so the first thing I talked about it with her was charter schools. At that time, I had already been working in charter schools. I knew the ins and outs, the laws, educational management companies, how much money you can make into charter schools, what type of services you can provide, educating people. And that was she felt that was a good investment to move forward. But as we continued talking, we realized that, hey, you know what? There's not really a real African Chamber of Commerce or African Business Association that deals with really supporting Africans in a sense of community and civic empowerment. And so that's when we started talking about, at the time, it was called the National African Business Association. I came up with that name. We very connected with two Gambians, friends of hers, and the four of us started NABA. And so the genesis of that was we wanted to figure out what city that we can actually invest in. We didn't want to do Detroit because we didn't have the resources or the financial capital to compete with the heavy hitters, like the Skillman Foundation. These are foundations here in Detroit, like the Skillman Foundation, Kresge, Kellogg, Knight Foundations, Ford Foundations, things like that. We didn't have the heavy hitters or the philanthropists, that kind of power to deal with. And we said, you know what, it'd be best if we focused on small local urban communities. These are communities or Black cities that are forgotten. These are Black cities that are that do not have resources, and many cases have never had resources available to them to help repopulate or rebuild their cities. So we looked at a couple of cities. We looked at Highland Park, Michigan. We looked at Ecorse. We looked at River Rouge. Then we looked at Inkster. And the reason why we picked Inkster was because Inkster was 24,000 residents, 6 square miles. It's sat next to the actual airport, Detroit Metropolitan Airport. You had 2 trunk lines going either through or near Inkster, and that is Michigan Avenue that leaves downtown Detroit to go to downtown Chicago, and I-94. So it was strategically located, and at the time, the mayor of Inkster, he understood the importance of connecting a Pan-African connection between the city of Inkster and sub-Saharan Africa. So one of the strategic moves that we did early on in NABA was lobby and position ourselves to be stakeholders within the city of Inkster by getting appointed to the downtown Development Authority in Inkster, to the Tax Increment Finance Authority in Inkster, and I was elected to the library board. And there's only been 4, as you heard. I don't know if you heard this at Trade with Africa Business Summit when I gave my presentation, but there's only 4 Nigerians that's ever been elected in Michigan. I was the 4th one. I just happened to be on the library board. Whether people look at that as the lowest fruit on the totem pole or not, what people need to understand is that Inkster got their school district taken away in 2013. And so the library board is really the only system that taxpayers pay on to help perform education and things of that nature. And that's why I joined the library board for educational purposes and to strategically position GABA as a heavy hitter. So at the time is NABA. So
did you move from Houston down there then, or sorry, cut you off? Did you move from Houston up to Inkster at that time? Okay.
I did because Rary told me, Rary and my aunt both told me that they were not going to run NABA unless I was here.
Okay.
And they kind of made that real clear. So I had to move back. So we started moving forward. I started recruiting people for the team. We started with small programs. The advantage that we had in NABA that most other African organizations didn't have is that I had deep political clout, both Democrat and Republicans. So from my previous engagement as an educational activist, as a lobbyist, I used to be a Democrat and Republican, both precinct delegate on the Republican side. So I had a lot of relationships that we can leverage right away, unlike other organizations in this area. So we leveraged those relationships doing our legislative visits. I'm drafting public policy on behalf of NABA. I'm positioning us in terms of economic development. position. So it was a lot going on, and it moved very, very, very fast. And so, I emailed the team. I emailed the team a couple of days ago about the master accomplishments of both NABA and GABA, and I did that. I wanted to show you guys that because oftentimes people can't keep track of their accomplishments. And that's, in 5 short years, we've been able to do that. So we continue servicing the community, but what was starting to happen was we started getting a global presence, a real global presence. And so I connected with one of our global ambassadors in Nigeria. She joined, followed by a young sister out of Mozambique who we recruited out of the Young African Leadership Initiative in Notre Dame, at University of Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana. And then we managed to get another global ambassador from Houston who represents Cameroon. And we started and then from there, it kind of evolved into a more global focus on how to link global communities to local communities. I've never been a real fan of the federal government doing work for us as a people, even at immigration issues. I've always said to myself, immigration can be looked upon as a social justice issue, but it can also be looked upon as an economic development issue. And so with us, we've always taken the economic development issue because if we could hit a community in their pockets, they'll start to listen. And so it started evolving more of a global platform. And one day my digital marketing director sat down with me and said, hey, we need to change the name of this because NABA is getting confusing. When you do a digital search, NABA is getting confused with the National Association of Black Accountants. It's getting confused with a bunch of other organizations. And that's when it made perfect sense to change it from NABA to GABA. And so that's where we're at. And as you can see, this is the work we do.
Amazing stuff. For me, it's always been about, which will lead me into talking about the African capitalists. And, anyway, I've been about the community, right? So as Africans, grew up in Africa, in Togo,
Mm-hmm.
and moved up here. For me, the community really, I did not quite feel empowered by the community, right? As far as it was a lot of go out there and do it on your own. And as far as mentors and things like that, there wasn't too much of that, right? There was levels that I felt the community saw as making it that were not really in at the same level as others doing it, right? Our ceilings were a little low compared to what most people consider making it, right?
Right.
For instance, guy like, get your papers, get a job, you're good. School wasn't really, even something that people were encouraged that much. Just make sure that, stay out of trouble and get a little bit of money. You get 6 figures, you're good, just that kind of stuff, right? And
right.
So I felt like a community where, it was laid out where we help each other, right? I always give the example of, Asian community, like, when you go to Chinatown, where you see every business is over there. They have their own school, they have their own bank, they have their own hospital, right? Some of the pivotal things that we need, right? And as a disabilities community here, I think we've discussed this with you. There's about 3,000-4,000 Togolese people here in Omaha. That is
wow, that is fantastic.
Yeah,
that is phenomenal.
Right.
There's a lot we can do. There's a lot we can do with 3,000 or 4,000 Togolese. And I have a master plan for Omaha, but I'm gonna let you talk though.
Yeah, no, I can't wait to hear that too. But it's always been like, why don't we have a system in place that way? The people who are already here, the newcomers that are arriving, we can push them through the system, right? If it took me 5 years to get to a point, now that I have that, after stumbling through it and failing, right? the next generation after me should be able to do that within months, right, or a year or two.
Mm-hmm.
So, how to put in place that process so that, hey, and the mindset of back home was always a big thing for me, right? When we all,
Right.
were friends, right, it was always about, okay, well, once I'm done, once I retire, I'll go back home, and I'll start making money back home. Or then all this was like a 40-year plan or 50-year plan because we were coasting the whole time, and that didn't sit right with me, right? I did not. I mean, as much as I love the United States, I did not want to give up my home, right, for the quote unquote American dream, for
Yeah.
that amount of years, right? I figured if I focus and there was a system that was in place that there are people out here doing it in 5 years, people out here doing it in shorter amounts of time. This is the land of opportunity after all. So how can we build a community that is sharing the information that is needed for others to get there, right? How do we then, and the few that have made it, I mean, personally, I don't really see them out there, reaching out, or maybe if they are, they're not looked up as, they're probably looked at as being braggadocious. People aren't always open to receiving that kind of help, right? You see the people who are out there and promoting leisure and fun and things like that, and culture, which is all good, right? Like, which is all great, good and all, but we need economic power to really.
Yeah. So one of the things, Mr. Wonderful, you have to understand is, and the biblical scripture I live by is, many are called, a few are chosen. And even if you have 3,000 or 4,000 Togolese living in Omaha, Nebraska, only 1-2% is going to come along with the plan which you just laid out. Is we need economic power in a city like Omaha. Now, there's a couple of things that should. There's a couple of things we need to kind of go over. Number one is, what type of industry are you trying to court people to be sustainable in Omaha? What industry exists in Omaha, Nebraska right now that's drawing people, non-Africans and Africans alike, to work, live, and play in Omaha? That's the first question.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I would say, tech. There's, believe it or not, there's quite a few different tech companies that are either here or moving to the area. That's one of them. As far as the economy, I need to do a little more research on that.
No, let me help you out. No, I asked that for a reason. So let me help you a little bit. There's two things you should focus on. And when you read the GABA plan in depth, you'll see what I'm talking about, what I'm about to say to you.
Okay.
No matter what community you live in the United States, and if you're trying to galvanize a group of Africans to live in a specific neighborhood or a specific community to build a tax base, it has to be around two core things. That is STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, and also career technical education. Those are the two things that you have to have in place to create, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, and career technical education. Okay. Some people back home call it technical vocational educational training. It's the same thing, just depending on where you live. Those two things have to be a marriage, because that is the basis of building a community for Africans. So it doesn't matter if you're in Omaha or Lincoln or Detroit or Inkster or Benton Harbor or Chicago. If you don't have those two things in place, the question becomes, why am I coming to your community? Why should I live here in this particular neighborhood? So those are the things. So let's break that down a little bit. You mentioned tech. So tech can go a few ways. If I'm living in Omaha, Nebraska, there are two things I'm going to pay attention to in the neighborhood. I'm going to pay attention to the property values, and I'm also going to pay attention to the projection of what the value is going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years, because that means a lot to a family of 4 that's trying to invest in a home. The other thing is, what is inside your Omaha master plan? Now, I started reading you guys' master plan. I'm still going through it. What's inside your master plan? One of the first things I have to identify, maybe you can help me with this, is what side of town do most of these Africans live in Omaha? What side of town is the Togolese community? Because if we can have a point of origin, then within the master plan, I can look at the zoning requirements to see what's going on with your zoning and see what's what. And then in some cases, depending on what type of industry we want to launch, we can even manipulate the zoning or change the zoning to make it fit our needs. So for example, if you wanted to set up, so you have Afro Omaha, okay, which was a very successful event on September the 14th, okay? Now, now this is an event you guys have every year in Omaha.
Right.
The question becomes, how do you convert a festival into a creative economy? I'm going to say that one more time. How do you transform a festival to a creative economy? Well, regardless of what side of town you live on, you want to set up what is called micro enterprises. And sometimes those micro enterprises need to be set up in a community where the property values may be in the toilet. Here's why. Because if they're in the toilet, that means nobody wants to deal with that particular part of the neighborhood. Because they don't want to deal with that particular part of the neighborhood, guess who got free reign on what this neighborhood is going to look like? You and I.
That's right.
Because no one's going to touch us. Okay? Everybody is focused on the central business district or your downtown area or the nicest part of town. Nobody wanted to mess with the hood. Well, the hood is a gold mine for those who have vision. And so you want to convert your cultural festival into a creative economy by passing ordinances on murals. Or if there is a mural ordinance, you want to start developing murals in an area to reboost those values. Okay, you want to start having micro enterprises like Togolese restaurants. You want to have Togolese fashion shops. You want to integrate West African fusion restaurants. You got people with all types of dishes throughout the continent, or through West Africa at this one particular restaurant. You may want to set up a Pan-African library. That's what they did in Houston with one organization. They set up a Pan-African library, and they have all these events that go on in this Pan-African library. So I'm giving you a few ideas on how to take a cultural explosion like an Afro Omaha into a creative economy where it will drive businesses and drive population to create a tax base. That's how you do it. Now, with that said, I don't know what the schools in Omaha look like, but if it's an urban area, it's probably in the toilet like here. So one of the things you want to pay attention to is key collaborations and partnerships. So what do we do in GABA? One of the things you can hear me talk a lot about is partnerships and collaborations. If you're a member of GABA in Omaha, Nebraska, and you're trying to teach cybersecurity, the best way to do that is, without spending a dime, the best way to do that is always to contact your community college that will come out and do a continuing education program. Now, they got continuing ed programs in any community college across the United States. You do a community education program at your local library where you have access to information and computers, and you create those trainings for people that look like you and I from the continent. And what happens there? You give them a certificate, and guess what? Once they're done with their training and get their certificate, and they can pass their certification test, information security analyst as in Network Plus or Security Plus, now we're positioning our community to go work. So now you kill two birds with one stone. You're creating a STEAM economy as well as a career technical education economy through community colleges, partnerships with community colleges and libraries. That's how you do it.
That right there, that's gold. That was gold right there. That was gold.
That's how you do it. See, that's how we do in GABA. GABA is all about partnerships. We don't believe in this organization. You'll learn this. We don't believe in reinventing the wheel. So if there's a large Togolese community, and let's say, for instance, and I'm going to tell you something about Togo, that, you know, Nigeria, where my folks are from, this is where the Togolese really can really turn Omaha out, what I'm about to say next to you. So Togo has a treaty agreement with the United States. Okay. So the Togolese, a Togolese investor can get here on an E1, E2 visa. So the E1 visa is more of a treaty trader visa, and the E2 visa is just an investor visa. The sister visa to the E2 visa is called an EB5 visa. Okay. The difference is between an EB5 visa and an E2 visa is an EB5 visa in a target employment area or high unemployment area, you must have about $500,000. Now they're getting ready to change that November 21st to $900,000 to invest in the community. Okay. And with an E2 visa, you can invest as low as $20,000. The only difference is you don't get permanent residency with an E2 visa, but you can renew that visa every 7 years. So if you wanted to purchase some homes, you want to stay here and work on your investments and work, you can legally do all that.
Wow.
And the only countries in Africa that has a treaty agreement with the U.S. is Togo, Senegal, Cameroon, Ethiopia, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Congo-Brazzaville, and I think it's Morocco. Those are only nations. Nigeria, these powerhouses like Nigeria, South Africa, Ghana, Kenya, we don't have the treaty agreements. So Togo has something platinum, golden, that can reinvent Omaha on a magnitude that we've never seen before.
Right.
It's just a matter of what type of industry you want to link Togo to Omaha. So if you're looking at agriculture, if you're looking at food processing, if you're looking at textiles, and here's another advantage that Togo has. Togo is also AGOA, which is African Growth Opportunity Act. Has a partnership through AGOA with the U.S. That means you can import so many things of textiles or agricultural products to the U.S., right? And it's tariff free.
Yes.
You see where I'm going with this?
Right. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So what I'm saying to you is you have to leverage all these things to reinvent Omaha as a destination for Togolese people in the U.S. You do it by STEM or STEAM industry. So you mentioned the growing tech industry. Yes. So there's a couple of ways of how to do a tech industry. The best way to do it is tech manufacturing. And so this is what they do in Shenzhen, China. So Shenzhen, China is one of the most advanced cities on the face of the earth. They have been building that city for 40 years. And the way they built that city was through special economic zones. And these Chinese investors started investing in tech manufacturing. They created a supply chain to help sustain their community. And that's what happened in Shenzhen, China. We talk about building Wakanda. Well, the Chinese have done it in Shenzhen, China.
Right.
And so how do you bring a tech manufacturing into a Omaha, Nebraska that will create jobs? Well, you got to strategically place some Togolese folks on your Economic Development Corporation in the city of Omaha. You have to place your Togolese folks on some special economic boards in the city of Omaha so that they can have a voice at the table to create a synergy that's going to connect Omaha to the rest of the world as it pertains to the African diaspora. That's what needs to happen. Okay. You don't have to necessarily run for office just yet, because you have to be trained strategically how to run for office, because when you run, you're running to win. But you can easily get appointed to a board. You can get appointed to a library board and create educational STEAM programs that's going to educate the Togolese community, not just in the community college, but also within the community itself. You understand that?
Right.
Smart cities. Smart cities are a very popular concept of how certain communities or certain cities not only save money on fraud and waste, but also reduce crime in some hot areas in a particular municipality. So these are some key steps that we talk about in GABA to train people. We know everybody's not here in Michigan. You're in Nebraska. We got folks in Texas. We got folks in New York. We have folks in DC. We got folks across the Atlantic. This is what we talk about and how you train these folks. And this is why Omaha is important to the Global African Business Association, because of the Togolese community. We want to invest in the Togolese community. We want to invest in the Sudanese community. But in order to do that, we have to look beyond just the basic business models that we've had so far. Most of our African brothers and sisters there need to understand the rules of the road as it pertains to immigration and visas, more so than a B1, B2, or trying to find somebody to get married. We need to be having discussions on the E1, E2 visa if you're Togolese. Right. We need to be having discussions on the EB5. We need to be having discussions on the O visa, the I visa, the P visas. We need to be having discussions on the EB1, EB2 visas. You understand? So, and the most importantly, we need to identify which businesses that exist that are African owned and operated that do not mind sponsoring other Africans to work.
What does that look like for them?
If I'm an F1 student going to a community college in Omaha, Nebraska, and I've been here for 2 years, the law states that I'm supposed to find work on a college campus. However, I can't do it. I'm going to go to my DSO. That's my designated student officer. I got to write a letter to my DSO or talk to my DSO about finding work off campus. The DSO signs off on it, reports, sends that to USCIS. USCIS approves of me working off campus up to 20 hours a week. I'm going to go to that African business owner and say, hey, look, I can work for you minimum 20 hours a week, at least part-time while I'm in school, and that person can hire me legally without either one of us getting in trouble.
Amazing. Yes, yeah. I was a former F1 student, so I was one of the luckier ones that found a job on campus. But yeah, that is a challenge.
That's a huge challenge, and part of it, the reason why it's a huge challenge is because we don't have systems in place to look out for our people. See, I work with a lot of Bangladeshi and a lot of Yemeni students. They have a built-in infrastructure. The Yemeni cousin owns a restaurant. The Bangladeshi student owns a business. So they have a built-in system where they can rely on each other in terms of work. Unfortunately, most Africans I run across don't have that system. Right. So we got to develop it, and that's what we're trying to do in GABA.
That's amazing. Let me take it this way though. So for me, it's always been about, okay, how does this then turn around to benefit Africa, right? Because I get that this will empower the communities and make people who are economically empowered to be able to do things back home. But how does that look like in your mind? For me, that focuses so much on, on Africa, right? How do you then see that,
Yeah,
without
when you yeah,
without
what happens?
the brains and the able people of Africa to be immigrating to the U.S. And depleting it further of its resources.
What happens most of the time? The mistake we make is let's go back and save Africa. If you want to save Africa, the United States of America is the best place to start. Here's why. Number one, you have the community in which you reside in have the best tools and the best economic development tools that you can leverage to build your community right now. If it's successful, you could take it home. So let's say, for instance, what we do in Inkster, Michigan, in terms of building micro businesses, purchasing land, um, writing ordinances, things like that. If we can showcase that here, we could definitely showcase that back home as a model to utilize at the local levels of government. That's the first thing with key partnerships. Number two, if we're serious about foreign policy, changing foreign policy in Africa, the best place to do is right here in the U.S. All African nations, all African nations most likely respect the U.S. and its direction. Even though China has a deep footprint in Africa, right, they still respect the U.S. Okay, so if you want to do something, it starts on Capitol Hill, it starts in D.C., and it starts with conversations where you're at in Omaha. It starts with your state representatives. It starts with your city council people by doing what they call sister cities and sister states and things of that nature. And you have to develop those models here first before you export those models back home to see if it works. If it works, and when it works, you can duplicate that model across the U.S. Now, sometimes, and I'll give you an example. Sometimes there's a reverse effect, and I'll give you an example of that. So, our global ambassador in Nigeria has what is called. She's the director of the Abuja Chamber of Commerce Industry Best Center, and so the Best Center is a vocational program. The way the model is set up is nothing but a training ground for people who are looking for work, people who are looking to increase their skill set. Well, the Best Center has a good model that they want to duplicate, not just in Nigeria, but across West Africa. Well, I told that same ambassador that I wanted to bring the Best Center here to Michigan because just like any Black community that's been hurt with unemployment and low property values and things like that, and no school district, no autonomous school district, I figured that the Best Center will be the best place to start and jumpstart education from a career technical education component right here in the U.S. So sometimes they have a reverse effect to that. But I think in terms of really changing our homes back home, whether it's Togo or Ghana or Nigeria, some of these presidents say, hey, we can take care of ourselves. And that's very true. And, like the president of Rwanda is he's very notorious about, self-sufficiency, and that's very important. And we want more African leaders to step up to the plate and discuss self-sufficiency. But at the same token, we here in the diaspora in the West, we too play a role in reshaping our homes and reshaping our nations, our respective nations. And so, but those conversations have to start where you at, not just getting on the plane and going home and try to fix it.
Right.
You can start fixing it right here.
Okay, that's great. So then this leads me into the African capitalists, right? And this is me. First of all, what does that, when you hear that, before we get into it, what does that evoke in you? The term or the name, the African capitalist platform.
Well, the African capitalist, any African capitalist is about wealth building, not money, not trying to be rich. Right. It's about wealth building. And wealth building is not just a physical capital in the form of currency. It's also spiritual capital in the form of wisdom. It's also understanding mental capital in terms of understanding maturity as it pertains to the direction in where you need to move forward in a 21st century mindset. The African capitalists need to understand all three of those that I just mentioned in order to transform the community in which he or she is trying to accomplish. Period, point blank. It doesn't matter if you're on the continent of Africa or here in the West, in the United States or Canada. The most important thing is understanding the importance of linking the wealth and between those particular regions. The African Union has declared the sixth region of Africa, which is the African diaspora. So how do you tap into the sixth region with African capitalism? You tap into those regions by understanding that wealth building first starts at the spiritual component and the spiritual level of things, followed by the mental maturation of understanding your purpose and your purpose and your vision and what direction you want to move in with this, and make it manifest at the physical level, which is your execution plan. And that way, if your execution plan works out correctly, that physical wealth that you call money or whatever the case may be, your currency, you'll be blessed with that.
Okay. All right. Absolutely. You know, that's it right there, right? That is exactly what I'm trying to get to with this thing, right? And he just laid it out so clear for me, because that's the goal, right? You know, when I started on this journey of, okay, I want to build wealth so I can, quote unquote, you know, I want to be able to build a hospital so I can help a lot of people, not just donate blood, right? You know, it's metaphorically. So when I got into thinking those things and taking action to put myself in a position that you know, I'm getting the knowledge that you know, first of all, because you got to have that to be able to, you know, invest, and you know, this spiritual part of it came into play, right? It takes a different mindset to be able to be you know, thinking those way, focusing on the right things, you know, and the platform that and I'd like to hear from you. I personally, I think this is very needed. Maybe you feel like there's something going on like this already, but is there a platform, and the way that I would like to build this with people is to share stories in a podcast format or YouTube format on things like such conversations that we had, right? About you know, generating wealth. People under their 30s or like that I've been hanging out with are not having this type of conversation, right? So how then do we put information in front of them? You know, do you sense that need as much as I do? And do you what kind of impact do you think they'll have on?
I think what you should focus on is a couple of things. Traditionally, I was a blogger back in my deep political roots, especially when I was a Republican in the Republican Party. I was a very consistent and avid blogger, and that's what a lot of people remember me as. You know, this guy who used to talk about me as a candidate, or he was opinionated about certain issues. People remember that stuff. Whether it's a positive or negative effect, that's another conversation for another time. But I think in this day and age, what you should stick to is what you're doing. So you're on Instagram, you're on Facebook, you know, you're on WhatsApp. I think a lot of people know about GABA. It's because I have been very, very consistent as a president. I've been very consistent in getting our message out. And my message is very, very clear, which is, you know, GABA stands for Business Education, Business Support Systems, to promote businesses between the U.S. and Sub-Saharan Africa. And what that means is, in so many words, what I'm telling people is, you live in a community that is depleted of businesses, you live in a community that's depleted of economic development. Instead of you beating a dead horse over and over again, how come you have not looked into the diaspora to court African-based businesses to establish here in the U.S. to help rebound your tax base? Period, point blank. And I've been very consistent with that message for 5 years. And the thing is, you have to understand is you have to be real consistent. Sometimes you may have to tag 2, 3, 4 people on social media. I do that a lot in LinkedIn. I do that a lot with Facebook. I do that a lot with Instagram. And of course, hashtags always helps. And before you know it, people know who the African capitalist is. Period, point blank. But it's all about consistency. People your age and younger, they unfortunately, they hear the message, but they're still trying to have fun, if that makes sense. People who are older than me, older than you, older than me, they think they know everything. You can't tell them nothing. So that's what I meant by many are called and few are chosen. And I've learned on this journey personally that everybody's not going to be called. I think this is one of the most sophisticated platforms that we have. I mean, I'll lay it out for you like this. When you join GABA, you join a network, people who are experienced like yourself in real estate. You join people who are experienced in educational systems, whether that's cyber education, traditional education, charter school education, or international education, vocational education. You have that conglomerate at the table in GABA. You have digital marketing and fintech people in GABA. You have people who understand business solutions like Deborah, like Tina Williams in GABA. You have people who can help you get capital for your businesses. You have people who understand politics from an international standpoint. You have people who understand public policy and have relationships, not just in the local levels of government, but on Capitol Hill. So what you do is you come into a network, and that was not easy building this kind of network. Community development, these things. You're coming into a network where it's very sophisticated. And guess what? We're a very small group. Right. We don't have 1,000 members. Right. Because 1,000 people don't want to join because they know it's work. I'm not a person that, unfortunately, no offense to anybody who does this. I think if that's within your mission of your organization, you should do it. But I'm not a person that likes to throw a whole lot of programs and we walk away with no substance or nothing, no follow-up or anything. I'm not a person that put on a whole bunch of dinners where we sit down, we eat food, listen to a boring speaker, and we all go about and exchange business cards and nothing ever happens. I'm not a person that go to a lot of conferences just to shake hands and do a lot of photo ops with people who may or may not even like me, and we go back to our respective holes. That's why I Trade with Africa Business Summit. I'll share this with you. If you go back and listen to the end of Trade with Africa Business Summit, where we met, the thing I said at the end was, don't let this be your last stop, because oftentimes we get to these very important business summits, and we don't exchange cards, we don't get to meet each other, we don't get to know each other, and we go back in our respective cubbies and our respective comfort zones, and that's what happened. That's what happened. And so I know what I did. I reached out to everybody who, if I had a card from you, I reached out to you within a couple of days. And I gave even a document called Linking to Wealth, 100 points. It's 100 points of wealth. I designed the document on behalf of GABA. I wanted to show people that Ambassador Muchanga is talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area from a global standpoint, and I'm showing it to you locally what we're doing in GABA to make this a reality, to be participants in that. I shared that with everybody who I had a card with, and only a few people. Of course, only a. Oh yeah, huh?
I'll need to see that. I don't know if I got that one.
Oh, I'll give you a copy. No problem. Every GABA member need a copy of that. That's Absolutely. Important. I'm not just here. So where I'm going with this is, I'm not interested in just doing things like that. I'm interested in um, I'm interested in results.
Right.
This is not about me. I'm not in this to get rich. I'm not in it because of my ego. This is an organization that 80% of the membership are women. Um, we have very unique things that we do here differently. And the reality is, hell, I don't mind coming to. I said this many times. I don't mind coming to Omaha, Nebraska, and talking to the community, setting up shop, setting up a master plan, and
Yeah.
executing the plan the way we need to see fit.
I love
We
that you said
understand. We
that.
understand these things.
Right.
Hmm?
I love that you said that, and I was actually gonna invite you to one of the episodes that I will be having. That way where I feel like, as a part of the community, I do I can tap into a few resources here and kind of get people motivated or about hearing these sorts of things. And you have a great message that I would love to. I guess we can set up a more
Yeah.
set up a time and have a conversation like
Hmm.
this. I'll send you a few points that I would love to discuss, and anything that you
Sure.
make sure you get
Yeah, but
covered.
this is a team effort.
Right.
So if you need the president or the executive vice president to speak or meet in our executive leadership team, that's what we do. Period.
Okay.
See, this is a team effort. This is not about you or versus me or anything like that. This is a team effort. And I want people to understand out there that if there's a Togolese community that needs to be tapped into, I may
Right.
not speak French, but I know common sense. I can make some things
Right.
happen.
Right.
If I don't, if there's a Sudanese community that
Yes,
feel
there is.
disenfranchised,
Right.
then that's why we're here. We want our Sudanese brothers and sisters, our Togolese brothers and sisters, to understand their respective communities coming together as one, understanding from East Africa from East Africa to West Africa. You understand,
Right.
or Northeast Africa to West Africa, to understand that there is power in numbers, there's strength in numbers, and there's economic dollars in numbers. To understand that Omaha can be a model city like Minneapolis, it could be a model city like Portland, Maine, it could be a model city like Aurora, Colorado, and all these cities I just named have significant immigration, African immigrant populations, and these people are turning in the economic dollar left and right. Clarkston, Georgia, is a refugee community, mostly of Ethiopians and Eritreans. Um, there are all kinds of models that we can look at, and Omaha does not have to be exempt from that. The thing about Omaha, Nebraska, is that you just have to find a way to unite people. You guys already have that model. You guys just had a festival with this Afro Omaha. Now you got to drive economic dollars on cultural art into a creative economy. So you got to find it. So I don't know what neighborhood. So this is where I get lost.
Right.
I don't know which neighborhood or which community the
Hey,
Togolese community live
whenever
in.
you're ready to come down, you have a home here. My home is yours, and I'll be able to, help you navigate a little more. You
Okay,
asked
I'm gonna
earlier.
hold you to that.
Yeah, do that. Do that. Do that. You asked
Okay, I'm
earlier.
gonna hold you to.
Yeah, what part
Yeah,
of
and the
town?
reason I'm saying, yeah, I'm just saying that because that's important. Because a if we have a portion of town where there's a community,
Right.
then we can start asking the questions like, where's your financial institutions?
Right.
Who do you bank with? Do you bank with anybody? And if not, why? Um, what schools are the children going to? That's important.
Right.
I know that, and I do know this about Nebraska. You guys don't have any charter schools because there's no charter school law on the
No.
books in Nebraska. I do
Right.
know that much.
I was actually going to
Um,
ask you about that too. You mentioned
but
that those were
but
investment
if
opportunities.
yeah, but if you wanted to do charter schools, Jesus, it's not, always, you know, there are other ways at this point how to circumvent the process and empower children academically. Because charter school trying to establish charter schools um, or a charter law to allow charter schools in a state like Nebraska. If they don't have it in this day and age, there's a reason behind that. You need to find out who's fighting against that, because that's a much bigger thing. That's a much bigger fish to fry. But again, where are your kids going to school at? Hell, even if they're going to regular, bless you, even if they're going to regular traditional public schools, and depending on what school they go to and what district they're at, that might be an opportunity long term for someone in the community to run on the school board.
Right.
You understand? So
Yeah.
I'm just saying there are ways to circumvent and deal with this type of stuff. But what I'm sharing with you is, moving into 2020, we have an obligation at the Global African Business Association. I'm telling you this right now. We have an obligation. Omaha is on our list to do in 2020. We just need to know the background from you three, Medea, yourself, and Deborah, because you're our eyes and ears out there. We just need to know the background of what we're dealing with, and then we can come out and roll out the master plan easily.
Awesome. From what all we've said, and to be able to, I guess, dig into GABA's resources, is there any other one or two individuals that you think would be beneficial to me to have a conversation with regarding the African capitalists and as a platform of education and work building?
What I would like to do is, if you set up a podcast, if you were to set up a podcast,
right,
we would plug it into our network.
Okay.
So the same way I distribute things on WhatsApp,
Sure.
you'll be part of that distribution list.
Okay.
I know we're working on Afrocentric TV. That's a partnership we have with Afrocentric Television Network in Houston. We're trying to work on some content to develop here in Michigan so that we can create that more national bridge.
Right.
That might be a third bridge may come to the African capitalists.
Right.
It's on TV show.
Okay.
It's on TV show, hosted by Mr. Wonderful himself.
Hey, why not?
And I ain't talking about Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank. I'm talking about Mr. Wonderful.
That's right.
And what happens is, you produce the African capitalists from Omaha, Nebraska, talking about African community in Omaha, Nebraska, and you send a feed to Houston, and they'll broadcast it. So now we're creating the synergy of a network, a real network. See, you don't see that in the African community. What you'll see is Africans leasing channels. I'll show you how it works. They lease channels, or they launch YouTube channels, which is okay, whatever, or Roku channels, however they want to do it, and they focus on one content most of the time. What we're trying to do in Afrocentric Television is create NBC. See, NBC has content on the West Coast and the East Coast, and it's fed through one signal. Same thing we're trying to do. And GABA's involved in that heavily.
All right.
All right.
All right, man. Hey, this was great. Thank you so
Anytime,
much for all this great insight. I was just messing with me. But anyway, I'll be reaching out. I'll be reaching out once everything is set up, and I'll try to put some time on your calendar. Love to have this conversation again, and there's a lot of help that's needed out there. And
that's why we're here. That's why you're part of the team.
Absolutely. All right.
All right, brother.
Thank you very much, man.
You're very welcome.
All right.
You too, my friend.